If you want to make junk journals and you say, I hate sewing in the pages because my stitching sucks, I'm Donna from Australia, and there's lots of videos on how to do this pamphlet stitch. But you still haven't mastered how to do the pamphlet stitch properly. Regardless of how hard you try, your stitches are crooked and loose. So what's the answer? Is it as simple as we creators say it is? I think it can be if you practice, and practice is key. I'm going to show you how to master this stitch 3 times. I'm going to show you how to make these 3 practice journals, and when you're done, they're good enough to be used as a journal. After watching this video, I'm confident that after using my practice technique, you will have improved. So let's get started. What you're going to need to start practicing this stitch for this one is just some cardstock. This is an old file folder, so you don't need anything too heavy. This is copy paper, and I'm using it in a colour. You can use white if you like. And you need some thread, and you need a needle, and you need an eye in the needle that's big enough for your thread. You need a pokey tool. I've got a bookbinder's awl, I've got a clay pokey tool, and I've just got a craft pokey tool. You need some clamps, whether they're embroidery clamps, a peg, or just a stationary clamp. If you're an absolute beginner, I've even got a template for you. This is the whole template. You can download this in either A4 or letter size printable. For practice number 1, this is for absolute beginners. If you do not need help with this, skip this step and go to the next step, which is mastering the stitch. What I've done here is I've pre-cut my cover. It's 4 3/4 by 8 1/4 inches. That's 21 centimeters by 12 centimeters wide when it's folded in half. And I've done this because it's gonna make it a lot easier for you to master this stitch if your pages are exactly the same size as the cover. I'm using 8 sheets of copy paper, and I'm going to fold it in half. Doesn't matter if the ends are level or not here, just fold it in half and crease it down the center. This is going to be your spine. When you put this back in your cover, you'll see it's exactly the same height, but it's too wide. So just put your ruler on and cut off the excess paper here. Now you should have downloaded and printed out your template by now. Cut it out around the black line and then fold it in half with the print facing you. Once you've folded it in half, it fits perfectly inside your journal. Then get your pokey tool. I find this best to lay it on the table, and with the pages almost closed like I've got here, I only open them to show you where the marks are. Where it's almost closed, just put your pokey tool on those dots and pierce it through all of the pages and the cover. So you should end up with your 3 sewing holes all pre-drilled, ready for sewing. So you can see them through the outside here. It's a little bit hard to see on this cover, but they are there. As soon as you've poked your holes in, don't let any of these pages move. Put the clamps on now. This is going to help you master this stitch so that none of the holes move out of their alignment. About the thread. This is a DMC cotton thread. It's really strong and it's not too thick. This is the one I'm going to use today, this coloured one, and you can see I'm tugging on it. If it doesn't break, it's strong enough to use. But if you do this and it breaks, toss it to the side. Do not use a weak thread. Embroidery floss is very common. Comes in beautiful colours, but I like to use all 6 strands. Let's start practicing the 3-hole pamphlet stitch. I'm pulling out 3 lengths of the height of my journal in thread. You don't need this much thread, but I'm making it extra long in case I want to do some decoration on the tails after I finish. Thread your needle and just pop a clamp on the opposite end so you don't pull your thread through the hole. I'm going to start by putting my needle in the center hole on the inside of the journal. And when you do this, make your journal almost closed. So all the holes line up and your needle will go through to the outside of the journal easily. Now pull your thread all the way through until your clamp reaches the spine on the inside. Now my journal is facing upright. It's going to be a bit too hard to sew, so I spin it around so it's easier for me to deal with these holes. So the next hole to me is on the left. So I'm going to go from the outside. Again, my journal is almost closed and I'm turning my journal around again so it faces me. Don't be afraid to turn your journal to make it easier for you to work on. So now I've got 1 stitch, started on the inside, went to the outside, I've got a long stitch on the outside and I'm back in the middle. I don't like the colour that's landed on the outside, so I'm just pulling this through a little bit to show a bit more of the pretty colour on the outside. Now, the centre hole, I'm not going through it on the inside. I'm going to skip it and I'm going up to the top hole. See how I've got my book? See how I've got my journal closed a little bit to go through that hole? If I open it flat like this, all of the holes are going to move and the needle will not go through. So just close it slightly. Now I've got the needle through to the outside and I've got 1 long stitch on the inside. I need to come back through from the outside to the inside through a hole I've already been through. So I've got a stitch in here. What can happen when you go to do this step is your needle will pierce through the center of the stitch that's already in here. And if you do this, you're not going to be able to pull your stitches tight. And this could be one of the major reasons that your stitches end up loose, because you cannot pull them tight if you pierce this thread now. And I'll show you a close-up here because I've actually pierced this thread. And I'm going to also show you how to fix it. I'm going to come back to the outside and I'm just going to pull my needle out. The thread that's on the inside, I'm going to pull it back in the direction that the outside stitch goes. When I pull this a bit tight, it gives me a little bit of room on the outside to come right beside it. So you can see here with this enlarged photo, you can see the needle is now able to come in beside the stitch and not through it. So then all I've got to do is grab the needle on the inside again and pull that thread through. Now I've got both my threads on the right hand side of my page. I'm going to duck under my long stitch and have 1 on the left and 1 on the right side of my long stitch. My long stitch and my outside stitches are very loose. So I can take the needle off my thread now. I've got very long tails. You can see why I didn't need the full 3 lengths, but I'd rather have it right. I'd rather have too much. Now, I want to pull my stitches a bit tighter. So I'm going to do it gently first. I'm going to grab 1 tail at a time and just gently pull these up towards the center of the spine. I never pull my threads across the width of my journal, only ever up the center of the spine line. If I pull them here, they're still going to be loose. Even though I've pulled them tight on the inside, they'll always remain loose because they haven't been tied off. So grab them again on the inside and pull one towards the top and one towards the bottom. Do the ping test and tie it in a knot over the top of this long stitch. You can do a double knot if you like, but I've got a pretty secure knot here, and I'm just going to cut off the excess thread. I'm going to get my bone folder and just press the spine down so it lays nice and flat. Now I'm going to do a ping test again, and you can hear it. You can see it and you can hear it, that these stitches are tight enough. You don't want them that tight that you can't move them at all, because if you do that, you'll tear your holes and you won't be able to turn your pages. You can see here that they're perfect because you can barely see the color of the thread. And this is a fairly thick thread, and they're laying beautifully flat. So I've got my tension perfect for these stitches. This style journal is an ideal way for you to practice. You are putting no pressure on yourself whatsoever if you just use an old file folder and some copy paper, fold them in half. You're not worrying about different size pages. You're not worrying about, are you ruining your beautiful papers? You're not worrying about anything but getting this stitch right. This is what you're here for. You're here to master the 3-hole pamphlet stitch. Make a couple of these. If you don't want to make another one of these, practice on this little one I'm going to show you next. It will be ideal for you to stick in a couple of pockets as you get going. Now let's do the practice stitch on this tiny little journal. It's like a notebook. It's going to be really straightforward to make. I've printed out an Amity Bloom page, and rather than print it as a full page, I've just printed it at 5 by 7 inches on 200 GSM cardstock. I don't want anything heavy. I want to make it easy. So I've just cut it out, and I'm using some leftover pieces of tea-dyed paper, and I'm only using 3 pieces. When they're folded in half, I've got 6 pages. You can use anything you've got for a cover. Place your pages on the inside of your cover and get your little pegs again and just put one on either end. This time I'm not going to use an awl. I'm going to show you, you can use your needle to pierce the holes. I'm not using a template. I'm just going to push the needle through, one in the center, one a little bit down from the top, and one a little bit up from the bottom. We're going to start our stitch from the inside of the booklet and sew to the outside. Spin the book around if it'll help you. Then put your needle in the next hole and come back through to the inside of your booklet. Now you're on the inside, skip the middle hole, go up to the last hole on the inside, put your needle through and go straight through to the outside of your booklet. So now you've got this long stitch on the inside and one short stitch on the outside. I'm going to pull my tail out of the road so that I've got myself a gap in the center hole that I can put the needle through without piercing my thread. Because I'm using embroidery floss, it is very easy to pierce the thread. So a good idea is to come back from the inside of your booklet, re-poke the hole, and then come back to the outside, and you'll find it a lot easier to be able to push your needle back through to the inside. Now I'm on the same side of this long thread. I need to duck under, so I've got one to the left of it and one to the right. Same as I did on the first journal. All of my stitches are very loose. I'm going to lay my booklet on the table. I'm going to pull one thread to tighten the thread on the top, and pull the opposite thread to tighten it on the other end. Once I've done that, I'm going to check it on the outside, still very loose, haven't finished yet, and I haven't tied it off, so it'll always be loose. Then I'm going to get each thread at the same time. I'm going to start pulling them left to right, parallel with my spine. Once I've done that, I know I can feel it. I can feel it's right. I can feel the tension's good. I'm going to tie a knot over the top of my long stitch on the inside. Take my clamps off and I'm all good to go. This is a great way to practice the 3-hole pamphlet stitch. When you're doing a practice one with a little booklet like this, your confidence should have grown a little bit. I'm going to check the tension in a different way. I'm going to lift up my pages and look, I can't budge them. I can't lift them up. I can't push them up towards the top or down to the bottom. When I open the pages, you can barely see the brown embroidery floss. This is a good indication that my tension is perfect. So grab yourself some off-cut papers and a pretty piece of cardstock and make yourself some little booklets. Don't grab the stapler. Practice the 3-hole pamphlet stitch. We're going to make this one a little bit different. The stitch is still the 3-hole pamphlet stitch, but we're going to use a Daphne's Diary magazine for the cover and all different size papers for the pages. Start by cutting out your cover and folding it in half. Then gather all the paper pages you want that's going to fit inside that cover. You make the cover whatever size you like. Before we poke our holes in, what you need to be concerned about here is where the holes are going to go to work in with the placement of your papers and the size of your papers. Example, this short page here is going to miss the hole at the top. Get the hole here. It'll get the hole here at the bottom, and this will be enough to hold it in place when the book is finished. It's the same with this pink page here. You've got to work out where you want to place your holes to know whether or not you want to catch all of this pink page in, or is it only going to have 2 holes. If I place it in the middle and I put my holes closer together, it'll catch all of this page in those 3 holes. This page here, I'm making out of envelopes. I've just put 2 envelope flaps together and they'll be sewn in between 2 pages. So if I sit it here, I've got to work out where I want it. Do I want 1 stitch in the middle to hold it in place, or do I want to push it down towards the bottom and have 2 stitches holding it in place? Now I'm right in the center of all of my pages and I'm going to sew this. It's a paper bag, but you would do the same if you were using an envelope that was open. I'm not gluing this together. I'm leaving it open and I'm going to use the stitches to hold it in place in the fold line here. So I want to make sure it's got a stitch, at least 2 stitches, to make it stay in place without wobbling around. It's not big enough to catch all 3 stitches. So I'm pushing it up towards the top. So now I'm ready to think about lining up my pages before I start poking my holes in. You can see here my pages are not even. Some are long, some are a little bit shorter, and some are really short. So I'm not even going to try and even them up like I did on the very first journal, where the pages were exactly the same size as the cover. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get the ones that are noticeably hanging out from too far from the cover, and I'm just going to make sure that they are inside the cover evenly from the top and the bottom. Right, so they're just my longest pages taken care of. My envelope is going to stick out the blue bit here at the top. It'll fold back when I'm finished. So I use a ruler to make sure the folds of my pages are pushed right down into the fold of my cover. Now I've got a lot of pages here. I'll put on the screen how many I've got because I forget. And I find it even better to do this method. I lay it on the table, so one side of the journal is laying flat, and then I get my fingers, like in my right hand here, I'm pushing all of the pages towards the spine of the cover. Once you're satisfied that you've got all of your pages pushed as far as they'll go, you can put the peg on. It's always best to put one on each end. I'm just going to put one on because I want to show you how to troubleshoot when your holes don't line up. Now this template here I used on the very first journal. I could easily use it, but I'm not going to use it for this one because I don't want my top and bottom hole as close to the edge. Instead of having it come down about 1 inch from the top and up 1 inch from the bottom, I'm coming 2 inches. You can use my template if you want to. As you learn, you'll get to know you can change these measurements. You can come down 1/2 inch, you can come down 1 inch, 2 inch. You can put these holes wherever you like. Using my bookbinder's awl, I'm going to push my first hole right in the middle. I'm pushing all the way through my pages and right out onto the fold line of my cover. I'm not pushing in too far because I don't want a giant hole. Then I'm going to the bottom or the top, it doesn't matter which one you do first, and I'm coming 2 inches up. Because I've got some smaller papers, I want to catch them in. So that's 5 centimeters or 2 inches. Now, when I come up to this next hole, I've got this pocket and I've got a little dilemma. If I put my ruler there and I go to put my 2 inch mark there, it just misses this blue area on the pocket. But if I come down further, I'm going to have 2 stitches showing on the outside of my cover. One's going to be long and one's going to be short. So I decide to miss the top of this blue envelope and just go beside it. Look here, I'm going to take my peg off and I'm going to put it down, move my pages and put the peg back on. I'm going to show you why you shouldn't do this. But first, I'm going to get my thread ready. I'm using an embroidery floss, all 6 strands. I never split my strands. And I'm going to start sewing from the middle hole inside my journal. I start pushing the needle through and I can't get it through. And this is because I took my peg off. When I took my peg off that were holding my pages in place, all of my pages moved and none of my holes line up. So I'll show you how I fix it. You can do this with your needle or your awl. I like using my awl. Take off your peg. I'm going to put my awl in the first couple of pages where it goes through easy, and then I'm going to flip my pages over a few at a time, but as I find the hole with my awl. I'm not forcing anything. I'm just gently finding all the holes again and pushing my awl through them. So you can just see the end of my awl peeking out, and then I'm just threading the pages onto the awl. You don't want to make your holes any bigger in the pages, and you definitely don't want to tear your pages, or this will add to your pages being loose later on. So once you've done this, you can then take your awl out. My left hand is holding on for dear life. I'm not letting any of my pages move. I'm putting my needle through while all these holes are lined up perfectly. I've got the tail here on my thread, and I'm going to put my clamp on it so I don't accidentally pull my thread all the way through. Now I'm going to turn my journal around. I always find it easier to sew from my right hand side going left. Now this hole's not matching up either. I've got to come from the outside back to the inside. Now you would think that you would get your awl or your needle and start lining up the holes from the outside, but don't do this. Line them up from the inside of your journal to the outside of your journal, because this is the way you punched your holes in the first place. So that's the direction that you want to be following now. So once you've lined all these holes up again on your awl, like I said, you can use your needle if you need to. You're coming all the way through your pages, then just finally pop the cover back in place. Once you've pulled the awl out, swap hands. Hold onto your pages with your left hand, and then your needle will go through the cover and through all of the pages to the inside of your journal. Now it does get a little bit easier now because we've got these two holes lined up. I'm going to pull the tail thread down towards the bottom a little bit. That's going to help me get this thread out of the road. I'm going to get my bottom thread, and I'm going to miss the center hole and go back up to the final hole in the top here. Going to turn my journal wherever it's easier for me, and because I'm going to put my needle from the inside heading out, it's always much easier to get your needle to go through all of the holes. So it was definitely easier this time. So now I'm going to come all the way out and just pull my thread snug. I don't have to pull it tight just yet. I can take the clamp off now because I've got less chance of pulling this thread all the way through. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the tail thread on the inside, and I'm going to pull it down towards the bottom, pull it a little bit tight, and that's going to help me get the needle in here because I don't want to pierce the thread. Now with this thread pulled down towards the bottom, I'm going to get my awl, and I'm just going to find the hole from the inside to the outside. This is going to make it easier for me to bring the needle from the outside to the inside. Look, I know this must sound complicated, and these are all extra steps, but it really does help. So all I'm doing is making a tunnel to make it easier for me to come from the outside back into the inside. So you can see here I'm coming beside the thread, and the objective is not to pierce the existing thread because I've got to share this hole with a second stitch. So here I am, I've come out beside it. So now I'm going to turn my journal around. I'm going to spin it around because the awl's in my right hand and I need it to be in my left hand So I want to bring this stitch down to here. So now I've spun it around, the awl in my left hand and I've got the needle in my right hand. I'm gently pulling the awl out with my left hand while I have the needle in my right hand following it in line with that hole, and it goes straight into the center of the journal. And I'm not piercing the thread, and like I said, it was a little fiddly, it takes an extra step, but geez, it saves you some time in the end. So now I've got both threads on one side, I've got to duck under this long stitch, and now is the time for the tensioning. So I just pull it. It's always loose on the outside until you tension it correctly and tie it in a knot. So I like to spin my journal around on its side, but if you can do it while it's facing up and down like this, just go for it. Spin your journal around on the side so you can pull left to right. Pull that tension tight. The more you practice, the more you can feel when it's just right. And then tie a double knot. I'm going to cut my tail off short because I'm going to glue this pocket closed. Did I mention this is a beautiful paper bag from the Digitals from Amity Bloom? So I'll turn a few pages here and show you how perfect the tension turned out. You know you got it right when all your pages sit nice and flat and you can't see the colour of your stitches through the holes. There's no tears and there's no loopy threads showing. This page here is a pocket page, so I'll just glue the top and bottom down. Now I've sewn the pages in. It's perfect for the little booklet. And there's heaps of journaling space in this journal. This short page here has been held in by both two stitches and the page in front of it and behind it. I'll just glue that down now it's sewn in. I'll have to come back and trim a bit of the top of the cover off because it's just a bit long at the top here, but I can do this easily later on. This one, if you're a beginner, is a little harder to do than this plain one here where you've just got the pages the same size as the cover. So start with this and this little one and then evolve up into the Daphne's Diary style. But either way, keep practicing. Make one of these journals and make as many of them as you like. And if you want to make a few different styles, watch this video next.
No one ever knows where we're heading, where the story goes.